Luka and Zion could make history. What's up, fellas? This is a video I've been trying to get out for days, but the NBA just keeps having stuff going on. There's the Kemba trade, there's these teams getting knocked out of the playoffs, but this has been something I've been wanting to talk about for a few days. There was some news that came out last week about Luka Doncic and Zion Williamson, and the possibility that both of them are frustrated in their current situation and that they could potentially ask to leave, and what would be an unprecedented move for players on their rookie contracts to be so unhappy that they would ask to leave the way that some of the more veteran star players in the league do. We're going to talk about, is it feasible? Is it viable? Is it something that makes sense? And is it something that could actually happen in this video? Okay, so let's start with the Mavericks part of this, because I think this is the more dramatic part. So the Mavs are going through some changes organizationally. They're looking for a new GM, they're looking for a new coach, and there was this article that came out last week painting a picture of dysfunction within the Mavs organization. And basically, you're either Team Luka or you're not. And of course, the franchise is kind of, at the mercy of what Luka wants to do. He's arguably the best 22-year-old NBA player of all time. He's incredible. He's an MVP candidate. And with the way that the league works now, you have to cater to the needs of your stars if you want to keep them around, even if they are on a rookie contract. And there was some tension between Luka and Rick Carlisle. It's not like he went to the Mavs and said, you need to get rid of Rick Carlisle, it's him or me. But there was some tension, and they wanted to move themselves in the right direction. There's an assistant coach that seems to be the favorite to land the job, and he's a Luka guy. That's his guy. That's the guy he works out with. And they're really starting to lean into this idea of catering everything towards Luka. But it also painted this picture again of dysfunction, of a situation where Luka might not be particularly happy and could be looking to go to a bigger market down the road. And then the other piece of news that we got was about Zion Williamson, arguably the brightest young star the NBA has had coming out of the NBA draft 2 years ago in a very, very long time, potentially since 2003 when LeBron came into the league, fresh off of a fantastic statistical season. Reports came out that there are people close to him, family members and otherwise, that don't think New Orleans is the right place to be, don't think that they are a competent franchise that's going to surround him with players that are going to allow him to be successful, and they also already want him to leave. And this is nothing new. NBA players ask out of their situations all the time. But what is new about this is these two players are still on their rookie contracts, and some people are starting to speculate that they could ask to be traded and end up somewhere else. Here's the thing with that. It's never happened. It's never happened one time in the history of the league where a player on a rookie contract that is successful asks to go somewhere else. The league is set up in the opposite direction of this. The league wants their star players on their rookie contracts to stay with the team that they were drafted by unless the team chooses to trade them away. They don't want to create a situation where the draft doesn't mean anything. Because if players are allowed to leave to go to New York or go to LA after 3 years, then getting the number one pick in the draft isn't nearly as exciting, because immediately the anxiety of potentially losing your big time star player if they do pan out haunts that franchise. The NBA understands the value of the draft and the value of that to keeping the smaller market teams engaged. It's one of the most beautiful things about the NBA, that whether it be free agency or the draft, the fortunes of an entire franchise can change in an instant. And that feeling changes drastically when the possibility exists that your star player could leave while still on the rookie deal. So there are things in place to incentivize players to remain with the team that drafts them, regardless of how successful they are initially. Those being restricted free agency, where after 4 years, even if someone like Luka wanted to leave as a free agent, the team that drafted him, or the team that he's on going into restricted free agency, has the opportunity to match every single offer. Of course, in this scenario, Luka is going to get a max, but if he wasn't, and he accepted an offer from a different team, the Mavs would have the right to match it and keep him rather than go into unrestricted free agency. Because think about the clock and the countdown that would immediately go onto these players and onto these teams if restricted free agency did not exist. Imagine drafting Luka, and 2 years later, he's an MVP candidate, and you know that he could be a unrestricted free agent. You could lose him for nothing after 4 years. It's why restricted free agency exists. But that's not the only incentive that the league has in place to prevent situations like what is potentially happening here with Zion and Luka. Financially, it makes way more sense for a player even as talented as Luka, even as talented as Zion, to remain with the team that drafts them for at least a handful of years after their rookie contract. They can sign a much bigger rookie extension with the team that drafted them rather than being traded somewhere else or signed somewhere else in terms of, just the financial aspect of it. The contract just is not as big, and they would have to give up a significant amount of money in their 5th year if they did want to become an unrestricted free agent earlier than they would in order to put some pressure on the franchise and create some leverage. So let's talk about the context of that, the specifics of that. Luka is essentially a year away from being a free agent, right? Assuming he doesn't sign an extension this offseason, and Zion is 2 years away. And typically, when we're dealing with veteran players that are unrestricted free agents, that are on teams that potentially are disappointing or not doing as well as the star thinks they should, potentially a disgruntled star situation. When you're a year or two away from being an unrestricted free agent, you have all the leverage as one of those star players. But that does not exist for these players that are on rookie contracts because of restricted free agency. So let's just say, in an imaginary scenario, tomorrow, Luka and Zion both came out publicly and said, I don't want to play with my team. I would like to go somewhere else. I'm looking to be traded. That trade request means much less in that context to the franchise than it would if they were impending free agents, because they don't have any leverage as players apart from just not showing up and not playing, which they would take a huge financial hit for. So what I'm getting at is I don't think there's any reason to be dramatic about Zion possibly leaving or Luka possibly leaving, because they would have to do something unprecedented. The only option they would have to create leverage in this situation would be when their rookie contract is over, which is after 4 years. So next offseason, let's just assume Luka does not sign an extension this offseason and he goes into next year. What you can do to get out of restricted free agency is, rather than signing a max rookie extension like everybody does, you can sign a qualifying offer to play that 5th year on a 1-year deal. It wouldn't be in excess of like $20 million. I'd have to look up the actual number, but it would be a significant number, but it wouldn't be what you'd be making on an annual basis on your extension. Let's just use an example of 1 year, 15 for Luka. The qualifying offer, you sign it. After your 5th year, you can become an unrestricted free agent. And then in that moment, from the moment that Luka signs the qualifying offer, he has all the leverage in the world because he is an impending free agent. He's someone that has an incredible amount of value around the league. And of course, the Mavs would not want to lose him for nothing. Zion in 2 years could do the exact same thing. Sign the qualifying offer, and you can become an unrestricted free agent as a rookie, or as on a rookie deal, in the NBA after 5 years. Here's the problem with that. In that individual year, you're giving up a ton of money, especially if you're Luka and you've already earned a supermax. You're giving up $20 million in that 5th year. You're risking long-term financial security because you could injure your knee, and even though you probably still get a significant contract, it might not be what you could have potentially gotten over the span of that 5 years. You're putting, in Luka's case, almost $200 million up in the air for the right to become an unrestricted free agent after your 5th season in the NBA. And nobody's ever done it. Not one time has a player signed a qualifying offer and then gone somewhere else or put pressure on a team to trade them when they are as successful as Luka and Zion. It's never happened to a player even remotely close to the talent level of those two guys, and that's the only point of leverage that they have. Kristaps Porzingis, when he arrived in Dallas, when they didn't know if they were going to give him a max rookie extension, he flirted with the idea of signing the qualifying offer and becoming an unrestricted free agent the following year. But ultimately, all that did was force the Mavs to give KP a max contract. That is not really in question for either Luka or Zion. I don't think they need to convince either of their franchises to give them a max contract. So ultimately, what I'm saying is that in this moment, there's no reason to freak out. Even if Zion or Luka tomorrow came out and said they don't want to play for their teams, they don't have leverage to steer themselves in the direction that they want to go to as in terms of a trade, or to be traded at all, unless, again, they quite literally just don't show up and they don't play. Now, having said that, someone's going to do this eventually. I don't know if it's going to be Luka. I don't know if it's going to be Zion. But someone's going to do this eventually. The reason I don't think it's going to be one of these two guys is because Luka's already earned himself the Supermax extension, and he's going to be making a ton of money. After this year, his rookie contract will run out, and he'll be making over $30 million a year. It's a tough thing to pass up if you're him, and you've made the playoffs 2 years in a row. It's not like the Mavs are awful. And then for Zion, you know, as great as this most recent year was, he's had more than his fair share of injury issues, and I don't think he's going to give up the long-term security of what will be a max rookie extension for him either. So the context of these two scenarios are not leading me to believe that either of them are going to accept a qualifying offer and try and become an unrestricted free agent after their 5th year to put pressure on either of these teams to trade them. The other point about this is players have no difficulty getting traded with multiple years left on their contract now anyway. Anthony Davis got traded with multiple years left. Harden got traded with multiple years left. So you can sign the extension and then do what everybody else in the league does. Yeah, maybe you spent your first 6 or 7 years on a team that wasn't fantastic, but then you steer your way towards LA or New York or whatever market you want to go to once you're fully in your prime. That is kind of the cadence of how these rookie contract things work, is because the NBA has so many things in place to keep these guys where they are, financially and otherwise. They stay for 6, 7, 8, 9 years, and then at that point, they decide to move on either as an unrestricted free agent or pressuring the team to trade them away. Again, at some point, somebody is going to do this. Somebody is going to be an incredibly successful player on a rookie deal on a team that is not doing the correct things to build around them. And then they're going to sign the qualifying offer, become an unrestricted free agent, and use all of that leverage to push themselves towards the situation they want to be in. And I think it would be a really interesting path because, again, you'd be giving up a ton financially, but you'd also potentially be gaining a much better situation for you as a player earlier in your career. And this is just the natural progression of this player movement era that we've been in for the last handful of years, where guys are jumping to different teams and free agency is as big of a deal as it is, and big markets are as big of a deal as it is. Eventually, like I said, it's going to happen. But for this aspect of it specifically, I'm probably more invested in this idea of player movement than almost anybody. I mean, it's fantastic for me. It's great for content. A lot of my content is built around free agency and trade stuff. And if anybody would have wanted for Luka or Zion to go somewhere else to request a trade from a purely selfish standpoint, it would probably be me, right? But I don't think that it's good for the league for the reasons that I stated in the beginning of the video. The draft, free agency, the possibility of getting one guy that could completely change your franchise is largely the basis of the hope of most franchises in the league. Think about the Hawks right now. They're in the Eastern Conference Finals. A year and a half ago, Trey was complaining about not having enough help. Imagine if Trey had the option to suddenly become an unrestricted free agent just 2 years later and the Hawks don't go on this playoff run. And, Atlanta fans are looking at Trey Young potentially leaving after 4 years because he's an unrestricted free agent, or signing the qualifying offer and leaving after 5 years. That limits your excitement as a fan, because let's just say that possibility existed when the Pelicans drafted Zion. You'd be excited, but then immediately be thinking, okay, we have about a year and a half to prove to this guy that we're a competent franchise. Otherwise, he's going to ask to leave. And yes, that burden should be placed on every franchise in the league. They should be doing the correct things to keep players happy and keep one of, if they're lucky enough to have them, the 12 best players in the entire world on their team. They should do what they can to make them happy and make sure that they're going to stay there, because that's an incredibly valuable asset as a basketball team. But if the threat of them leaving is there immediately, I think it limits the fan experience. I think it limits the enjoyment of having one of those guys and having the security and the safety of knowing that a player like Luka or a player like Zion, there's a very, very high likelihood that, barring anything unprecedented, those guys are going to stay for multiple years into their prime. That's something that I think needs to stay, but at some point, someone's going to challenge it. I just don't think it's going to be Luka or Zion. But yeah, that's going to be the end of today's video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, check out more videos from me in the box on screen. Leave a like rating as well. And yeah, hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.